Hi, this is Dr. John Zielonka, health and wellness expert, chiropractor, author, founder of National Health Day, and the Director of Health and Wellness Canada. You are about to listen to an interview I did as a guest speaker on the popular internet radio show Health News, which airs weekly out of the northeastern United States. In this interview, I put an end to all the misleading newspaper headlines and answer the question once and for all, do vitamins make you live longer? I also discuss the need to live in a health and wellness paradigm, the best way to predict future heart disease, and even how to prevent prostate cancer. I urge you to act upon the information you're about to hear and share it with your friends and loved ones. It could save both your and their life. Please also go to my website at www.yourhealthstore.ca or excellenceinhealth.com for the very best in health information and access to the world's best vitamins, or contact us by phone at 613-688-1036 in the World Exchange Plaza in downtown Ottawa. Please take action on your health. You have the power to live an incredible life. Now please enjoy the interview.
Well, hello, it's Dr. Alan Weinstein here at the Weekly Health News Show, and today I'm bringing back a guest of mine that most of you are familiar with. The last time he was on the show, we had more feedback, more email. It was a fantastic show, so I'm totally excited here. We have as our guest, again, Dr. John Zielonka. Good morning, Dr. Zielonka. How are you?
I'm great, Dr. Alan. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm going to tell the listeners a little bit about you, even though they probably know a lot about you just from listening to our show. So let me take a minute and do that. Sound good?
Sure.
Number one, as I said, Dr. Zielonka was on our show once before. He totally hit it out of the park. He brings a wealth of information to our show. He's the owner of the Ottawa Chiropractic and Natural Health Centre. It's Ottawa's premier center for health and wellness. He's been voted the best chiropractic health and wellness center in Ottawa by the Consumer Choice Awards for both 2011 and 2012. He's the founder of National Health Day in Canada, director of Health and Wellness Canada. He's a regular contributor to CTV Morning Live. I believe he's been on that show maybe 100 times already. He has a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry, a fellowship in the Natural Supplementation and Anti-Aging. He's an advanced nutritionist. He's written 5 books. We're going to talk about one of those books today. He's the inventor of the world's best vitamins, and he's one of the country's most trusted health and wellness experts. As I say, he's been on the show before. If you haven't heard his previous show, give him a call at 613-688-1036 and ask to get a copy of that interview. It was really terrific. Dr. Zielonka, let's jump right into it. We got a lot of stuff to do today. I'm totally psyched here. You've written 5 books. I've already told them that. They've all been great. Let's talk about what motivates you to keep on writing, and specifically, why'd you write your latest book, The Science of Vitamins Meets Optimum Health and Common Sense?
Well, thank you for the question, Dr. Allen, because I feel the answer is extremely important. As you know, I love to educate, and I only write if my books are going to be different from books that are out there. This is a topic that people just don't know, and they need to know. Like, let me prove my point. Let me ask your listeners a question. What would your listeners say would be the biggest threat to mankind right now? Would they say terrorism? Would they say global warming? Do you think they would say nuclear war? What do you think they would say, Dr. Allen?
Well, I think they would probably, I think if we polled the audience, I bet you the listeners would be equally divided on all 3 of those.
And you know, that's probably true. And the truth is, it's none of those. The biggest threat to mankind right now is chronic illness. 90% of the entire population of the world will die due to chronic illness. Now, imagine if we had a nuclear war tomorrow and it wiped out 90% of the face of the planet. This is the exact same thing. It's just happening slower, and we think that's okay. And your listeners may say, well, no, we don't think that's okay. Well, you're living in that system that thinks it's okay. Science says lifestyle choice is the key to fixing this, and that almost all of this is preventable. And so understand, we wouldn't just change lives, we would save lives. We could save millions and millions of lives and billions of dollars. Unfortunately, we live in a belief system where we've been unknowingly brainwashed, and we're getting terrible information from sources that claim to be credible. That's why I wrote the book, to show you the good science, to apply common sense to it, and to do so from an optimum health paradigm. And if you act upon the knowledge in my book, it will empower you to take responsibility for your own health and have the confidence to know that you're doing the right thing, including saving your own life.
Well, I think you made a great point here. I think, the listeners at best are confused because there are so many so-called experts out there that they read one thing one week, the next week they read something else, they don't know where to go. But tell the listeners, what exactly is the optimum health paradigm?
Well, that's another great question, and also extremely important for your listeners to understand. Most people don't know what it means. And again, let me ask your listeners another question to prove my point. Let's say you've been working extra hard lately, and the stress is building up. You wake up one morning, and you find out you've got a headache, and you have low back pain, and you have the flu, all three of them. And you have two choices. You could go see a medical doctor. You could take your Tylenol, which would try to mask the headache and the low back pain and bring down the fever from the flu. You might even consider surgery for the low back pain. Or you could go see a chiropractor, and you could start taking vitamins. And as you and I know, chiropractic is great for headaches and for low back pain and would even boost your immune system. Now, my simple question to you is, which one of those approaches do you think your listeners would say is the sick care approach? And which of them would your listeners say is the optimal health or health and wellness paradigm approach? What do you think the listeners would say?
Well, that's really a terrific question. Interestingly, I think that people at this point would not say that the sick care model is seeing their doctor or taking the meds. I think at this point they've been programmed to think that is the healthcare model, which is obviously totally wrong, right?
Well, it is, and absolutely, and you and I know this. Both of those models are actually sick care, and that surprises a lot of people, because a lot of people would say, well, of course, seeing the, if the ones who believe they're in the know would say seeing the MD for the drugs is a sick care, and they would say seeing the chiropractor and taking the vitamins is the health and wellness paradigm. They're both sick care, because what you're doing in both cases is you're not doing anything until after your symptoms come on. You're not doing anything, preventative or optimal health. You're just doing things that are reactive. They're both sick care. Now, would the chiropractor and the vitamins be a much better choice? Of course. Based on the science, it's more effective, it has fewer side effects, it's more natural, but they're both still sick care. What an optimal health paradigm is it's living a lifestyle your entire life, but optimizes your human health potential, and it encompasses all of the 5 keys to health. Now, you'll never find that in the drugstore. There are drugstores that advertise themselves as wellness centers. That's ridiculous. It's almost as ridiculous as hearing, a brand of wellness cookies. And that has nothing to do with wellness. And the funny thing is that wellness is what chiropractors have been talking about for over 100 years. It's just we used to refer to it as the chiropractic lifestyle. Sick care, their idea of things like early detection and prevention, they have nothing to do with optimum health. And we know that the sick care system can never work. In Canada, we spend 50% of our tax dollar on health care right now. In the U.S., they estimate by the year 2043, 100% of your tax dollar will be going to sick care. And it's interesting because, right now you're getting into the presidential debates, and they're debating who's going to pay. And what they need to do is they don't need to debate who's going to pay. They need to debate what they're going to pay for. True, emergency care is one thing, but having more drugs, more surgery, more hospitals, more doctors will never do anything as well as living an optimal health lifestyle.
One of the things about that last question is that some of the choices that you gave for people aren't even a choice, even though, as you said, they're all sick care models. But in the U.S., I believe chiropractors only see about 3% of the population. So some of those, for some people, that wasn't even a choice, which is kind of interesting. But I totally get your point. It's a great point. I've read all your books. And what I'm really most attracted to is really the common sense approach to really how you deal with science. I have to say to the listeners, I never read 5 books by the same person. I'll read one book, out of respect to them, but Dr. Zielonka's approach is really so common sense that I've been attracted, and I've read all his books. So talk about really what that common sense approach to science really is.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, it's essential that we actually understand what science is. Understand, we're not talking, when I grew up, I used to watch The $6 Million Man. We're not talking about, making a bionic man. We're not talking about the amazing technology where they can now do heart surgery on a fetus, things like that. What we're talking about is how misled we've become on science when it comes to what are called randomized double-blind studies or observational studies. So, I mean, think about it. If science was really so authoritative and was the answer, then how can we have two different scientists having exact opposite opinions on the same topic? And why are they even having opinions? It's supposed to be science. So we also need to realize that sick care lives in the largest glass house ever constructed by mankind. What do I mean by that? Well, let me ask your listeners another question. What percentage of medicine would you think your listeners would say has ever been scientifically proven?
I think, using the format, I love this format that we're doing, Dr. Zielonka, number one, and I really think that what we're going to do in the future is maybe have some of our listeners actually email in some of these answers just so we can see what they really would say. But, I guess I would think they think a lot of it's been scientifically proven.
You're absolutely right, and that's the belief system they've been brainwashed into. And if you actually read the medical journals, 85% of medicine has never been scientifically proven, according to their own medical journals. That means only 15% has. And if you read those same medical journals, only 1% of those 15% has ever been done using scientifically sound protocols. So understanding this is key, because if we apply this to vitamins, understand how frustrating it is for someone who's looking for the right answers and the right thing to do, yet they see a newspaper headline one day talking about all the studies that say vitamins will make you live longer, followed by the next newspaper headline that says they won't help you or, in fact, even kill you earlier. From a common sense view, how can you have hundreds of studies that negate one another? And if you have 100 that say one thing, how can you have one that then says the opposite, and how does that negate all the 100 before that?
If you just joined us, we're talking with my good friend, Dr. John Zielonka. His phone number is 613-688-1036. His website, www.yourhealthstore.ca. Or his other website is www.excellenceinhealth.com. We've been talking really about his new book, which I'm really going to tell you, go to the website. You want to check this out for sure. The Science of Vitamins Meets Optimum Health and Common Sense. He's been bringing up some great points, if you've been listening, really talking about how the concepts that have been ingrained in our minds about what healthcare is, or should I say sick care, has really dictated to us how we live our lives. And unfortunately, it's a model on the verge of disaster, as he really points out. So we were just talking about some examples of, we were talking about how different views and opinions in studies, how does that happen? This is supposed to be an objective science. And one of the things you didn't mention before I go on is we get to find out when a suit is brought against a drug, that some of the studies that even showed that the drug was dangerous or not even effective get buried in the pile. You never even get to see those. But when we talk about different views and opinions, how does this really apply to the whole concept of vitamins and longevity?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, understand there should be no place for opinion in here whatsoever. What people don't understand when a scientific study is done is understand one of the key things is choosing what question you're going to ask. So in the case of, for instance, a cholesterol-lowering drug, the question that's asked is, does the cholesterol-lowering drug actually lower cholesterol? And guess what? A cholesterol-lowering drug does lower cholesterol. But also, guess what? There's not been one scientific study that has ever been shown that a cholesterol-lowering drug actually saves lives. If you want proof of that, actually start listening to the cholesterol ads. You'll even hear that. So let me give you an analogy. Let's say let me ask your questions, your listeners another question. Let's say I had a dying, wilting plant. What do you think your listeners would say would be the first thing I would give to a dying, wilting plant?
Water.
Exactly. Right? I mean, everybody would give a dying, wilting plant water. So you know what I did? Is I did a scientific study where I took a bunch of plants. I took 100 plants that were dying and wilting, and I gave them water. And I took another 100 plants, and I didn't give them water. And I took another 100 plants, as my control group. And you know what happened after all this? They were all still dying and wilting. And you would say, well, how's that possible? Of course, water is good for a dying, wilting plant. And, what I didn't tell you is I only gave them an eyedropper full of water. But guess what? I could give you a newspaper headline the next day that would accurately say that giving water to a dying, wilting plant was of no health benefit. So then let's say I did the study again, and this time instead of just giving it an eyedropper full, let's say I actually gave it the appropriate amount of water. And you know what happened? The same study, and again, they were still all dying and wilting. And you'd say, well, how's that possible? Well, what I didn't tell you is there were no nutrients in the soil whatsoever. And you'd say, well, hold on, that's not fair, but that's not the question I asked. The question I asked in my scientific study was water of benefit? And in this double-blind, randomized controlled study, it wasn't. So I could have a newspaper headline saying, giving water to dying, wilting plants is of no health benefit. So let's say I did another study where I gave, some of these plants water, some of them nutrients in the soil, some of them I gave both, some I didn't give any of them. And after all that, you know what happened? All my plants were still dying and wilting, because what I didn't tell you is I kept all the plants in a closet with no light. So, but again, I could have a newspaper headline saying, giving nutrients in the soil and giving water to dying and wilting plants is of no health benefit. So then let's say I gave water and nutrients and I gave sunlight, and you know what? I did the study again. They were still all dying, because what I didn't tell you is there were toxins. I poured gasoline in all the plants. Understand how this applies to vitamins and longevity is if you ask the wrong question or you're in the wrong paradigm, it's very easy to come up with a so-called study that doesn't come to the same conclusion. That's exactly the dying wilting plant. And if you think this doesn't happen, this happens. I'll give you, in my book, there's over 2,000 scientific references. But here's one, 2005, Journal of the American Medical Association. The title, their conclusion was that vitamin E didn't reduce cardiovascular disease. Now, what they actually did discover was that it actually reduced death by 24%. But that wasn't the headline. In their study, because they asked the wrong question from the wrong paradigm, they were able to come up with a headline saying, hey, vitamin E doesn't work for cardiovascular disease, even though it reduced death by 24%. Understand that if a study doesn't come to the same conclusion, that doesn't disprove the original study. And this happens all the time in vitamins. People are asking either the wrong question, or they're in the wrong paradigm, or they're using the wrong type of vitamin, or certainly the wrong quantity. As I said, if you give, an eyedropper full of water to a massive oak tree in the middle of the desert, you're not going to have any, success. Things are used on too short a period of time, and often there are no cofactors when it comes to vitamins. So that's of critical importance, because vitamins work together. So, for instance, in the case of, high cholesterol and Lipitor, for instance, theoretically what we're doing is we're trying to eliminate everything else to see if the Lipitor actually made a difference. And now guess what? Maybe that works for a drug like that, but in a health and wellness paradigm, it doesn't work that way, because vitamins need other vitamins to work together. The body functions as a whole. So let me give you another example. Let's say I wanted to know if blueberries were healthy for me. We all know blueberries are healthy, but if I ate blueberries and only blueberries, I'd actually create a problem eventually, because I wouldn't have all the nutrients that I need just from a blueberry. When we test only one vitamin, we're setting ourselves up to failure. It's something you actually mentioned in the last interview we did. People are always chasing the latest vitamin or the latest fad. They don't need to chase the latest one. They need a comprehensive, all-around approach to that. So you might see a study that says, hey, calcium, by itself doesn't extend life. But then you'll actually see the study that calcium with vitamin D does extend life. The same thing for vitamin E plus vitamin C. We're using the wrong yardstick. And think about how ludicrous that is, where we're trying to judge elements of the health and wellness paradigm by the sick care tools and the sick care standards. Like, imagine if we reverse that. Imagine if we said, okay, for Lipitor to be proven effective, we have to start giving it to 3-year-old kids, and then 20 years later, we want to see if it actually benefited all the lifestyle aspects of a 3-year-old kid. Obviously, it would be a gross failure. We'd actually end up killing the kid.
There's also another contradiction there, which I think is worth mentioning, and that is, let's say there's a scientific study that's done on vitamin E, and it comes out with a bad headline. The media will jump all over the headline, and you'll be bombarded with newspaper articles on radio, TV, everywhere. Well, vitamin E doesn't work. The latest study came out. They don't talk about what's wrong with the study, what's right with the study, what they decided to do in the study, but they sell the story by picking up a headline that they know that people are going to be attracted to. At the same time, they let manufacturers of food and products advertise, get your calcium from milk. even though they might have a study that they blow up that says, calcium, is not, the end-all cure-all to bone loss. So the media and the scientific literature are at odds with themselves because they're trying to publicize the stuff that doesn't work, and yet they take money from people that advertise that the same stuff that doesn't work is, inside the ingredients of the things they're selling. It's a crazy world when it comes down to it. Are there other examples of the science that show how wrong most people are about all this?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to give you a few examples that will just blow your listeners away. And really they should make you mad as hell that we've been so misled. A lot of this started with the famous Betacarotene Study. So this was a study that was done back in Finland in 1994. And to this day, there are, I'm going to say, so-called nutritionists and scientists, and certainly those newspaper, headlines that quote this as the first big study to show that vitamins actually cause problems. And the truth is, these people who are still quoting this study today should be ashamed of themselves. And I mean, if they were lawyers, I'd disbar them for such bad information, because when this study came out, when the newspaper headlines came out, people stopped taking vitamins, and that actually cost people their lives. There were people who died early because they stopped taking vitamins that were so beneficial to you. I mean, let me explain what happened in the study. They took a group of high-risk people, and they gave them beta-carotene. At the end of the study, they found that some of these people, actually died earlier, or their cancer advanced. Well, let me explain what happened in the study. High-risk people they took smokers. They took people who had been smoking 1 to 2 packs of cigarettes for 10 to 20 years. They gave them the amount of beta-carotene you would find in 2 medium-sized carrots, and then years later they said, oh, it must have been the beta-carotene in the carrots that killed you. It wasn't smoking the 2 packs of cigarettes a day for 20 years. Now, that actually gets worse. Is 10 years later, right, 2004, the American Journal of Epidemiology, they did a new analysis of the exact same data. They didn't do a new study. They used the exact same data in this beta-carotene study that people are still quoting as, saying vitamins aren't good for you. But this time they asked a different question, and they came from a different health paradigm. And what they looked at based on the total antioxidant intake. So basically that means is exactly what we're saying. Vitamins work hand in hand. And they looked at the study, and you know what they discovered? They discovered that the study actually came to the conclusion that it saved lives. Okay, not that it killed you earlier, that it saved lives. The exact same data, but they just came from a different paradigm. They asked a different question, and surprise, surprise, they came to the complete opposite conclusion that vitamins actually saved lives and prevented cancer.
I mean, it's totally crazy, is it not? I mean, it's amazing. And this is really, when we started today's interview, you basically said that, how is it that, one thing could say one thing and the next thing you read, it says the opposite. And really, if people took the time to listen to this, and hopefully more and more people will, and get a hold of this interview, and hopefully they'll get a hold of your book, The Science of Vitamins Meets Optimum Health and Common Sense, and all your other books, actually, because you really lay this out very, very clear. You back up everything you say with the scientific evidence. No one puts more research in their books than you. Again, we're talking with Dr. John Zielonka. His phone number is 613-688-1036. His website, www.yourhealthstore.ca, and his other website, excellenceinhealth.com. Now, Dr. John, the yourhealthstore.ca, can they go right to the website and buy the book there?
They can indeed. They can go right there by the book. There's also a lot of actually free health information as well, numerous health articles, and certainly also some of the best vitamins in the world as well.
Let's talk about, if you don't mind, change gears here a little bit. Not really change gears, but I want to throw something in here. The big C. That's always on people's mind, the big C. Let's talk about cancer a little bit.
Well, here, another perfect example is, and cancer, unfortunately, is way too near and dear to my heart. I mean, my father's had skin cancer forever, then discovered he had colon cancer. And, back then, he was told by 5 different doctors that he needed emergency surgery, and that if he didn't have it, he'd be dead in 3 weeks, and he was actually told it was a terrible way to die. At the same time, he had 3 other doctors who told him, whatever you do, don't have the surgery done because you'll never wake up from the anesthetic. I mean, talk about being between a rock and a hard place. Now, guess what? He opted not to have the surgery. Instead, he's filled himself, full of my vitamins. And now again, if you talk to, certain scientists, they'll say, well, that must be placebo or spontaneous remission. And the thing is, we know the exact chemical pathways of how vitamins work, and we know the exact chemical pathways, of how a lot of these diseases happen, and we see the results. There's nothing placebo about any of this. I'll give you a perfect example. Let's take prostate cancer. Prostate cancer, we know exactly how it builds. You get a buildup of testosterone, in the prostate. That's converted by an enzyme into something called DHT, which is dihydrotestosterone, just a different form. And that's what then develops the cancer. Well, guess what? We know that's how it happens, and we know that because there is a very small percentage of the population who actually have the genetic inability to make that enzyme that makes that conversion, and the people who fall into that group, they have lifelong immunity to prostate cancer. Now, also, guess what? We know exactly which vitamins block that conversion to that DHT. I mean, even the National Cancer Institute says that cancer is 75%, preventable. And it's interesting because once people have cancer, they'll do anything, to try and get rid of it once they have it. Well, wouldn't it make more sense, in a health and wellness paradigm to do anything not to get it in the first place? Instead, what we have drugs like Avastin. I don't know if you've heard of this down in the States. This was pulled from the markets earlier this year, maybe I think late last year, and it was for a very specific form of breast cancer. Again, too near and dear to my heart. My mother's had I don't know how many lumps in her breast, and the reason they pulled it was because it was unable to delay tumor growth. It did not prolong life. It was not able to improve the quality of life for women, but it had potentially fatal side effects. And these side effects included things such as high blood pressure, bleeding, hemorrhaging, heart attack, perforations in the nose, the stomach, the intestines. And do you know what the FDA commissioner said? She actually said that was a difficult decision to make. Now, what's difficult about a drug that will kill you and has no benefit, whatsoever? It's the same argument where some people, shy away from vitamins because they say, well, that hasn't been FDA approved. Well, these are the same people who brought you thalidomide and hormone replacement therapy and Vioxx and other drugs that kill people. It's not that people who take vitamins, yes, we want high standards to our vitamins. We just don't want the rulers of the sick care system to be in charge of that. If you stick to the basics, if you stick to the 5-star labs, if you stick to the good vitamins, then guess what? The risk of anything serious happening from a vitamin supplement, the risk of a drug killing you is 62,000 times greater than from a vitamin. The risk of a drug killing you is almost 8,000 times greater than any herbal remedy that's out there. The far bigger risk is not taking vitamins when they can save your life.
I want to say you're preaching to the choir. I always think when I read your books, I say to myself, I need to get this book in this person's hands and that person's hands. I call these people the naysayers. And, sometimes you give the evidence of that's so well presented as you do in your books, and yet they still have some type of objection to it, or they have some negative that they can bring to it. What do you say to these naysayers?
Well, if you've listened to everything that I've just said, I think you know what I'd say to the naysayers. People are entitled to any belief they want, but they need to understand that there's a difference between belief and fact, and they also need to understand that every belief has a consequence, whether you believe it or not. In my office, I have this saying called believe in gravity, which means basically if I took all your listeners up to the roof of my building and we all stepped off the roof, all the way down, you could say, I don't believe in gravity, I don't believe in gravity. Well, guess what? You're still going to hit the ground, right? And if they're health professionals, and they've given this bad advice, well, they've killed millions of people. There's irrefutable evidence, that if you understand everything that I've been talking about, heart disease, cancer, longevity, that vitamins save lives. Let me give you another example that will blow you away. Let me ask your listeners another question. Is what do you think your listeners would say, based on the science, is the number one predictor of future heart disease? Do you think they would say it's high cholesterol, high blood pressure, or smoking? What do you think your listeners would say?
Well, again, I think that's probably a question that would give a divided answer. A lot of people would say cholesterol because they've been exposed to all these advertisements for cholesterol. We all know that smoking is, really an issue. High blood pressure, maybe lower on the totem pole, but I still think we'll get a diversified answer.
You absolutely would. And now here's the interesting thing, right, is understand the best predictor of future heart disease based on the science is none of those. It's not high cholesterol. It's not high blood pressure. It's not smoking. They're all important. But the best predictor of future heart disease are the levels of vitamin C and vitamin E in your body. And this is not opinion. Right? This was a study that was done more than 30 years ago, done amongst 21 different countries. And you know how many participants were in this study? We're not talking, 10 subjects or 100 subjects or 1,000. There were 10 million participants. Now, given that that's true, why do we have a sick care system that is testing you for cholesterol and blood pressure? Why are we not testing for vitamin C and vitamin E? I mean, when you go to your medical doctor, they're telling you, well, we need your cholesterol checked to make sure you don't end up getting heart disease. Well, guess what? This is a better way. This is a better way of actually doing that. Instead, people are getting put on, the anti-cholesterol drugs, and they're dying, from it. So you talk about the naysayers. The naysayers it's just insane. The inmates are running the asylum. But those naysayers fall into different groups. You've got the scientists who don't realize that they're in the sick care system, or they have the arrogance that they believe because their study didn't get the same result, then all the other studies must have been wrong before that. You get the drug companies, and obviously the drug companies have no interest in getting you healthy and getting you off their drugs. And funny enough, some of the worst vitamins that are out there are actually produced by some of the drug companies. You get the MDs who have, unfortunately, they certainly serve their role, but next to no training in nutrition or vitamins or health and wellness. And again, what would happen? What would happen if we could snap our fingers and magically cure cancer, heart disease, diabetes tomorrow? What would happen to that system? You have a number of people who subconsciously have a vested interest in that system continuing. We've talked before about, the newspapers, and the other interesting group of the naysayers, you even have the people who are so pro-nutrition that they think you can get everything from the food that you eat. And yes, of course, if people ate better, they'd be getting more nutrients and more vitamins. And of course, nutrition is key. We talked about that in our last interview with the 5 keys to health. But you simply can't get everything from food. I mean, to get the amount of coenzyme Q10 you need, you'd have to eat 2.5 pounds of sardines every day. To get the amount of vitamin E you need, you'd be drinking cups of oil every day. I mean, most people get 1/1,000,000th of the probiotics that they need on a daily basis. And vitamin D, unless you're living, south of California, you're not getting the vitamin D that you need from sunshine. So it's funny, even the foodies, they've become what I call the foodies, of people who are so into, the raw food. That's great that they've improved their nutrition, but they've become so blinded by their passion that they have the one and only solution. And unfortunately, they don't realize they're hurting other people by not also supplementing with the vitamins that you need, to get back to your optimal state. I mean, the funny thing is sometimes they end up giving the exact same advice as the MDs do, who are saying, oh, no, you just get it all from your food. Well, that's not working.
One of the things that you brought up, which I think is really true, and there's certainly in the U.S., there's this movement for the government, the FDA, to want to take over the regulation of vitamins. And I think the reason for that is that, of course, if they could figure out a way to get big pharmaceutical companies who have their hands in the FDA to, if they regulate the vitamins, they can get the big pharmaceutical companies to sell the vitamins and turn it into a profit. And then I think we'd start to see some studies about vitamins that'll show much greater efficacy than the ones we see now. Two things here I think that are a challenge, and I want you to address these for me. One is, I like to call roadblocks, what stops people from taking action, number one. And in your case, I know, from being on your website, knowing you, reading your books and everything, you've designed what you say are really the world's best vitamins. Talk a little bit about those vitamins and talk about how people can get those vitamins, and also talk about a little bit of the roadblocks that stop people from taking action in general.
Well, and again, that's a great question. Let me just maybe start briefly with the roadblocks. I mean, that's part of the reason I enjoy doing interviews like this and why we write the books, is for some people, they simply don't have the knowledge. They've been brainwashed, in the sick care system. And so part of that is simply the continual encouragement and the knowledge, that empowers them, to take action, on their health. And when they do that, at some point you have to realize the sick care system simply isn't working. As far as the vitamins go, let me also address, the people who say, well, I must be biased because I've designed my own vitamins. And I think that's a ridiculous position. I'd be hypocritical not to have vitamins when I tell you how necessary, they are. And at some point you have to decide who you're going to trust. I mean, I don't go to my plumber for dental advice. I trust my dentist to give me the best dental advice. I've discussed this thoroughly in the book. A good vitamin is not the one that you're going to get, in the drugstore where everything is fit, in the one pill. And you know what? 20 years ago, I didn't have, vitamins because, I have this belief that there must be good ones out there. Guess what? A lot of that are just really not good. So the exact same thing as I do with my books is I'm not going to design a vitamin if there are 100 other ones out there that do the exact same thing. What I've designed is something called the Core Science Ultimate Health Packs. Okay? By far, the best vitamin on the market. What it does is it's really the only vitamin on the market that has all of the 5 main groups of vitamins, all the essential vitamins that are out there. The benefits, are amazing. I mean, everything from more energy and vitality, improved neurological function, superior cardiovascular function, certainly helps prevent against cancer, prevents premature aging, stronger healthy bones, less stress, improved insulin response, improved digestion, metabolism, immune systems, improved cholesterol levels, hormonal balance, even smoother skin, and yes, they will help you live longer. Let me tell you about one of my patients, from a sports performance point of view. One of my patients is a guy who used to run marathons, and he got bored of running marathons, so he started to seek out the toughest races in the world. So I don't just even mean triathlons. This guy would run 300 miles through the jungles of Korea. A few years ago, this patient of mine ran the equivalent of a marathon every day for 20 days in a row across part of the Sahara Desert in 55 degrees Celsius weather. And the reason I'm telling this story is he takes my Core Science vitamins, and he appreciates what he's doing when he runs to that extent. He says now that he takes the Core Science vitamins, it's amazing how much more he can abuse his body. Now, our goal is we don't want you to abuse the body, but understand that when you're at that level, you are causing damage to your body. The Core Science Ultimate, health packs are designed exactly for that. If you don't like capsules and pills, then we also have the Core Science Ultimate Liquid Vitamin. So the absorption is fantastic. Saves you the people who don't like to pop the pills and so forth, and can be even be used by kids. But understand, again, the purpose of today's interview is not really to talk about what my patients have been benefiting from for years. It's to set the record straight once and for all. 100 bad studies are not better than one good study, no matter how many newspaper headlines there are. There are thousands of good, studies that are out there. What it is people need to make that decision. They need to get past that roadblock you're talking about. If you want to live longer, if you want to live better, if you want to have the best that life has to offer, then definitely start taking vitamin supplementation for the rest of your life and take the best ones that are out there. And that's not my opinion. There's one scientist who independently looked at 1,500 different vitamins, and there were only 4 that got a 5-star rating. Okay? Wherever you go, make sure you're with a 5-star lab, and a 5-star lab does not mean that, that company said they were a 5-star lab. A 5-star lab is one that a majority of health professionals know this is a 5-star lab. Of course, the Core Science vitamins fit into that category. Or do you want to be one of these people who spend more time making excuses than they spend on their health? I don't want you to be one of those 90% who's being wiped off the face of the planet, by that slow nuclear war. There's nothing normal about getting heart disease in your 50s or cancers in your, in your 60s, or dying in your 70s. And today, that's not even 50, 60, 70. That's more in your 30s and 40s. After what you've heard today, there could be no intelligent debate as to the need for vitamin supplementation. More importantly, you have to take action. Health is in your hands. Vitamins work. The only requirement is that you actually take them.
Now, Dr. Zielonka, we're just about out of time, but I have one more question that I really have to ask you, because I see this happen all the time. I'm sure you do also, and I don't want to leave this left on the table without having this answered, because I know there are people that are going to get off this call and they're going to say, Dr. Zielonka convinced me I need to take vitamins. And that brings up this question. Is a low-quality vitamin better than no vitamin at all?
Well, that's a great question. And no, not really, because, you would think something is better than nothing. But, get back to my plant analogy. What you're doing is you're trying to water a mighty oak tree, with an eyedropper full of water, or with, something that just doesn't get absorbed, and then you'll never see the results that you want to see. I mean, understand, people need to invest in their health. They need to make it a priority, and understand, yes, there's a cost to health. There's a cost to not having your health. For most, it's a setting of priorities, where people say, well, I'm not sure I'm willing to invest in that. Well, guess what? You're buying that Starbucks coffee every day. You're smoking that pack of cigarettes, every day. For that cost, you could get the best vitamin, that exists for that same cost. And so the problem is when you're taking a really low quality vitamin, you think you're doing something positive, and you don't realize you're not getting anywhere near the same results, if in fact even getting the results. It's the same way, some of the studies come back as being negative, is you're trying to water the mighty oak tree with an eyedropper full of water. I mean, invest in your health, make it a priority, and really you do get what you pay for. You just need to know exactly who you can trust and where to get those quality vitamins from.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I'm really going to stress to all our listeners that, the proof is really in the pudding. Go on to Dr. Zielonka's website, www.yourhealthstore.ca. Take a look at the vitamins that are there. Take a look at the ingredients. Compare them to the things that you see. You don't see the artificial things. It's amazing. Some vitamins you see in the store, the low-price vitamins, especially in some of the big box stores that we have here in the U.S., they got more artificial coloring and more preservatives, more, things to make it, to appeal to you visually than it does any benefit to your body. So absolutely true. We've been talking with my good friend, Dr. John Zielonka. His phone number is 613-688-1036. His website, as I said, www.yourhealthstore.ca, and his other website, www.excellenceinhealth.com. I really want to emphasize to everyone on this call, we don't get the opportunity to have people of the scientific background, the quality of information that Dr. John Zielonka has. I always want to get him back on the show. In fact, I'd like to get him to come on the show and take over some of the hosting responsibilities. I'm going to talk to him in private about this, but this way I can go on vacation, because he's a great guy. As you know, he's as knowledgeable as anyone who's ever had on the show. Dr. John, before we say goodbye, and you do have 2 minutes, I don't want to have to cut you off because they're going to cut me off for sure. Anything you want to say in closing to the audience before I close out the show?
It's one of these things where my patients would never hear me say this, but, I think I've actually said enough. It's just a question of people going out, and I can talk forever, as you know. It's just people, they need to take action. I mean, we said this in the 5 Keys to Health. Don't let anyone ever tell you differently. You're the person most responsible for your health. It's not me. It's not your medical doctor. If you wait for the government, you'll be dead. It's not the insurance companies. You make the decision. I just want that to be an informed decision. And then nothing happens without action. You take that action, and you'd be amazed how much healthier you can be, and what's more important than your health. Think of that, how that affects every aspect of your life, your relationships, your quality of life, your enjoyment of life, and so forth. Please go and take action.
Totally agree. It's all about the action. People don't realize, we talked about this a little bit at the end of the last interview that I'm going to close out the show. We talked a little bit about this. People don't realize if you wait until you have a disease process, a pathology, something serious going on, is the number one cause of bankruptcies, of financial disasters, because it's very, very difficult to buy your way out of a health problem. Investing in the supplements that Dr. John's talking about, investing in his book. I mean, these are things that you really need to do. You need to take action. You need to take responsibility. Your health is really your responsibility, not anyone else's. We can't do more than what we've done on today's show. We've had Dr. John, and as I said once before, we're going to have him on again. This is Dr. Alan Weinstein for the Weekly Health News Show. I'll be back next week with one more health expert to help you take charge of your health.